So I really want this to be audience participation. I know everybody's on their phone looking at email and text messages, and that's fine. I get it. Sometimes I might say, hey, stop, this is really important. And we do have several experienced agents on the class. I mean, and I can't see everybody. Let's see here. So Osneda's worked with buyers a lot. Beer's worked with buyers. I know Jenna's worked with buyers. Let's see.
Brian's on. Barbara.
Yeah, Brian. Okay, so
Guatiala.
some of you seasoned agents, feel free to chime in, and unmute yourself, and if you have something to say or a question to ask, or you want to participate or throw your 2 cents in. But this is the second part. Last week we talked about what do we list, how do we drive the list price with our seller clients and come to a place where we agree what to list the home for. And we're just going to look at the other side of the coin today. And just as a review, for those of you who weren't in the class last week, I talked about the different lanes that we have as opposed to, say, an appraiser. And an appraiser's lane is value and worth. They're the ones that answer the question, what's my house worth? Or what is this house worth? And that's not our lane. And I know that might surprise people who are hearing that for the first time, but in our training and in every CMA we do, at the bottom of the CMA, it says, hey, listen, this isn't an opinion of value. Real estate agents are idiots. And only appraisers have the expertise and the knowledge to assess a property and to give an estimation of value at a particular moment in time. The thing we are qualified to do, so first of all, I find that very freeing, that I don't have to rack my brains like, what's this home worth? What's this home worth? What's the value of this home? But what we are qualified to do and what we're licensed to do and what we're trained to do is deal in the area of price, which is a different area. And just to show you quickly how different that would be, last week, you take a house, 123 Maple Street, and you stick 5 different people in that house as the owner. How many different list prices are we going to have if we have 5 different people?
5 different.
5, right? Because they all have different ideas, different perceptions of reality, different motivations. And so, we have to work to help them reach their goals. Well, let's flip it around. Suppose you have 5 people interested in buying 123 Maple Street. How many different list offer prices do you think you might see in a normal, calm, not in a everybody has to come in at full price market, but just in a normal, calm market? 5 different people. I'm not saying okay, not a multiple offer situation. Just you line up 5 different people and you say, hey, look at this house over here. What would you offer for it? How many different offer prices might you have? 5, right? Because they're all coming from a different goals, different motivations. Maybe just one of them has an uncle saying, never offer full price, always go in, 5. Karen, thanks. Karen's gonna be laughing the whole class.
Oh, tell everybody to mute themselves, please.
That's her job. Everybody mute themselves. Unless you want to chime in, then unmute yourself and speak up. Speak up. So that's our lane, is price. And so this is a class, really, it's you have to have a title. And I don't think this is a very necessarily catchy title. Megan asked me to teach these 2 classes about a month and a half ago, so they've been on the calendar before I even decided to take a vacation this week.
And we thank you for doing it while you're on vacation.
People who know me know that this is like a vacation. I like doing this. But my condo didn't have a Wi-Fi. I mean, go figure that, right? I already said that. So I'm here at Keller Williams Emerald Coast. Okay. So in this discussion about an offer, and this is, it's really not just what do I offer, what number goes in paragraph 3C. Everybody know what paragraph 3C is. That's where you put the sales price. So this is more than just what goes in that blank, but we're going to focus on that. But this is really a class about making a complete offer, because the dollars that are involved, the dollars that a seller is going to receive from a real estate transaction change with a lot more things than just the sales price, right? There are other things, expenses that we might ask the seller to pay, or we might pay that the seller would normally pay. And all of those numbers will change, kind of come together to make the complete sale price. So starting point. Now, when you go out to show homes, and now this is where I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. What should you, okay, guilty, by the way, of not necessarily having all these things in place, but if someone saw something and they wanted to write an offer on it, you have to be ready to be able to write an offer on it. So let's back up to what should be in place ahead of time before we don't put people in our cars anymore, but you know, before we put someone in our car and start showing them houses. Unmute and let's hear it.
Pre-qualification letter.
Ah, a beer, awesome. Pre-qualification letter. Good. And actually, it would be good if we've had a conversation with the lender, right?
Oh yeah, when you have it, you call the lender. You don't let the buyer just get it. You must confirm that it is actually a good lender that did their job.
Okay, that's on my list. The pre-approval, pre-qualification, proof of funds if they're going to pay cash. What else?
Hopefully an IBS and a buyer's rep.
All right, an IABS, information about brokerage services, and a buyer's rep agreement. I have IABS and BRA right here, buyer rep agreement. I also put general information and notice to buyer and seller. I think that's a real important document. I don't know why our office doesn't require it, but I think they should. Okay, what else?
Before showing or while showing?
Before, in other words, good question, Abir. If they saw something and they wanted to write an offer and you need to be able to move as quickly as possible, what are some things you could do ahead of time in order to be ready to do that if they wanted to do that?
You need to look at the tax records, make sure that it's within their tax range or whatever, because these are extra money that they will have to pay. It's not just about the price of the house.
Ah, good
Part of their
point.
installments.
Yep. How about just expanding that a little bit and making sure that a buyer understands how much it's going to cost them to own a home, how much it's going to cost them to buy a home. As a matter of fact, very important, write this down. Your buyers should realize, and taxes are definitely important, but your buyer should realize that in the first week after we get into a contract, they're going to have money flying out of their checking account. And very often, I mean, I can remember not covering that base with buyers. What's going to come out of their account?
The earnest money.
Earnest money, basically 1% of the sale price. What else?
Option fee.
Option fee, right?
Inspections.
And inspections. And by the way, that option fee and that inspection, that money is gone, right? Now, so they might understand, and you know, if you explain to them, you know, okay, you need to have this money ready to go, inspection money and option fee money, but don't forget to tell your buyer that the title company is going to cash the earnest money check. And I've had buyers call me, Chris, they just cashed my earnest money check. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, that's what, yeah, when you write a check, people are going to cash it. Well, I thought they were just going to hold it. Well, that's on me though, right? Because people might think, well, I get my earnest money back if I terminate during this thing Chris talks about called the option period. So I guess they're just not going to cash it until maybe after the option period. And I might have sent that message accidentally. So you have to cover that base with your buyer. What money they need right now in their checking account if they do buy a house or do get into a contract on a house. And then, like Abir said, they need to understand the cost of home ownership and that they're ready to absorb that. And hopefully their lender has gone over that with them as well. So, all right, so we're out looking at houses, and let's move on here to the next step. And they see something that they're interested in, and they want to consider making an offer. So what are the next steps? Chime in, Brian. Anybody. Jenna Petrie just did an amazing job for her client.
A CMA.
A CMA. All right. Just like we did for last week, right? Just like we do for listing. Now, and it's good. Our office didn't always require a CMA with a buyer, but now they do. And why do we want to do a CMA for the buyer?
I think it's to give them an idea of what the market has been doing around them and really like current. And also like to pull a CMA maybe back even from anywhere from 90 days up to a year, just to kind of show them where we are now and where we're like the progression, I guess you could say.
Okay. What are we going to get? How is the CMA going to help us with the offer price? That was good, Jenna. Good answer.
I think it will help us with the price in case that depending what offer they want to make. If we suggest a certain price going in, depending if the house have several offers, you don't want to go too low. But if the house doesn't have any offer, then a price that will not offend the seller. Although, like Chris always said, no offer is a bad offer. And what is that you said that if you don't make an offer, that's
a seller should not be insulted by the person who makes an offer.
Exactly that.
They should be insulted by the people who don't make an offer.
Don't make an offer, yeah. So just more or less to make sure, depending on the case scenario, if it's a multiple offer, to go in with a strong offer based on what the market is doing around them. Or if it doesn't have any offers at all, just go with an offer that we can negotiate with the seller if it's depending how many days has been on the market, all those things.
So, Osneda, what I think I hear you saying, and that's a great answer, what I think I hear you saying is that one of the things the CMA does for us is it helps us to gauge how the list price is. Is the list price like right on? Is it really low? I mean, how many times have we seen a home listed on the market and we're like, oh my gosh, that's going to be gone in 30 minutes. And we see that a lot. And, and it's only after really doing a CMA that we can really, we might feel it in our gut, but a CMA is going to tell us that for sure. And on the other hand, we do a CMA and we look at the CMA and we look at the comps and we look at the other houses that we looked at. But here's this house that our buyers really like, but the list price just seems what?
Way high.
Yeah, way high. And so the CMA is going to give us an idea about where the list price is in this range of value. Now let's talk about that for a second. What we're going to, and we talked about the 5 different people and how 5 different people would do 5 different offers, but they all should be within a certain range. And I think that there's two things to look at, and this is where you can take notes. I think two things to look at, and this is me, this is my take, the range of reasonable offers. And I believe that an offer that is to be taken seriously by a seller, and this is what I always tell my sellers, is 95% of list price. If you get an offer of 95% of list price, you should take that offer seriously, and we should work with it. Now, I am not, again, we're going to save multiple offer situations for the end of the class. Is that okay? So I'm talking about kind of just home has been on the market 25 days and along comes an offer, right? Now, another number that I have is 90%. Now, if you go and look, pull up a random sampling of 200 homes between 200 and 400,000 somewhere. Just pull up a random sample of 200 sold homes. You might see one or two out of 200 that sold for less than 90% of list price. So that, to me, you know, just in my experience, that makes me feel like it's going to be difficult for a seller, at least a seller that I'm representing, to take an offer less than 90% of list value very seriously. It's sending, if I have the house priced right, that's sending a message to my seller that, you know, this buyer is just really trying to steal a home or isn't really interested in, you know, a win-win. Okay, so those are two numbers, and that's over here on reasonable offer side. Now, another thing I want us to think about, and this is real important, is that I always talk to my buyers and I say, I believe from the data is telling me, and just like with a listing price, I never said, well, I recommend a list price of this. I always start that sentence with these words. The data indicates that a good list price or a reasonable list price from this home is between X and Y. Well, it's the same thing for a buyer. You know, the data indicates, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, that a win-win price for this home is between X and Y. Between X and Y, the seller isn't getting more than what they would expect to get, and you're not paying more and you're not paying less. It's a win-win range. All right, so I think that's important to determine. And I didn't bring my slide rule to Florida, but if you were in class last year, I had an old school slide rule, but now I'm just gonna use my hands, and over here is gonna be on the high side, and over here is gonna be on the low side. Does that look right to you?
Yes.
All right, well, anyway, okay. So once we get this win-win range, then based on the buyer's different needs and different motivations, we're gonna, you know, come up with an offer price. So see, all of that is to say that that's the goal of the CMA. You need to also, I'm gonna go through a few other things really quickly. You need to gather all the docs that you can from the seller. If there's a mud notice, you need to make sure you have that mud notice, or if there's two mud notices or a drainage district notice and a mud notice, get those, get the seller's disclosure. Gather all the documentation and all the information from the seller that you're going to need to write the offer. Then call the listing agent. Call the listing agent. And here are some questions, and I'd be happy to hear other questions from you guys to ask the listing agent. Now, you might not get an answer to this question, or you might get, you know, they might answer it with a question, but why are they moving? You know, where are they going? I'm not afraid to ask that question. Sometimes I wonder, someday someone's going to say to me, well, that's none of your business. Just bring us an offer. But they never do. They usually say something. And when I get asked that question, you know, I feel like sometimes the answer helps them come forward with an offer. What is your seller's perfect close date? Now, I'm not saying that we're going to shoot for that date. But by knowing the seller's perfect close date, then we're going to be able to use that in our negotiation down the road. So write that down. What's your seller's perfect close date? Of course, you know, which title company do you prefer? Now, I am not a person that insists as a listing agent on using a particular title company. There are title companies that I prefer, but it's nice to know what title company the seller prefers. Now, you don't have to put that in the offer, but it's a good question to ask. Find out the names of the seller, who actually goes on the contract as the seller. It might be a relocation company. It might be a corporation of some kind. It might be a couple and their names might have changed since they took title. Or someone might have bought it as a single person and now they're married. Now that in tax record only has the one person's name, and now you got to put both names on there. So ask who the sellers are, and you can go off the seller's disclosure. So you sign the seller's disclosure. That'll give you a pretty good idea. Okay, what else? What other questions? Unmute yourself. What other questions do you ask the seller? I'm going to open a window here, so maybe I'm not in the dark. But go. No one wants to say?
I usually ask if they need, like, example, like if my buyer is selling his house, I ask the seller if they are moving out of the house before they're selling, or they're waiting to move until they get the sale. So I can ask my buyer if they can move in the next day after closing, or the sellers needs more time to move out.
Excellent. What are the seller's plans? When are they moving out of the house? When is it going to be vacant? And Osanna, I'm just going to take that one step further. Ask the seller if you have to write a contingency contract contingent on the sale of your buyer's home. Ask them, would your seller consider a contingency, an offer that's contingent on our buyer selling their home? Right?
Right, correct. Yes.
Great. See, I didn't even have that in my notes, but I knew you would add something to it. Who else?
Also, base is going to be a lease back or not just a contingency if they want a lease back or not.
I love that, Abir. Would your seller want a lease back? Now, does that mean we're going to make an offer with a lease back if they say yes? Not necessarily, but it's good to know, just like, knowing what their exact or preferred closing date would be. Good questions. Okay, who else?
Are they planning to leave anything that is not excluded in the house, or is it exclusions, whatever? Just, are they planning to take away media room, or is it just no?
No, that's great. What exclusions are there? Because I find less and less that, information.
I'll put them in there.
MLS, about exclusions. And
some stuff are tricky. Like some stuff I've been dealing with a couple recently that there were a lot of little tricky stuff, like you don't know whether it's in, it's out. So you're better off. Mosquito system, is it in, is it out?
In my contracts class, I go over I go over all the ones that are in the contract. I mean, there's plenty already in paragraph 2 of the contract under, improvements and accessories. But there are other gray areas, and I think, Abir, that's kind of what you're talking about. And I would say even these days, washer, dryer, and refrigerator can be a gray area. And that, I cover all that in my class, but, ask the seller, ask the listing agent, what's staying and what's going. Because here's the goal. This is why you're doing this. The goal is that if you send over an offer and the seller wants to sign it, wants to accept it and sign it, it needs to be a signable offer. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later in the class, but certainly something that needs to be signable would include exclusions. Okay, let me say that again because I used two kind of opposite words there. An offer would include the exclusions, as well as any non-realty items that the seller is willing to leave with the home. And because the last thing you want is to send over this almost perfect offer and it's ready to be signed, but now the seller comes back and says, hey, this is great, but could you resubmit the offer putting these things in paragraph 2 under exclusions? Because what's that going to do? Now it's going to take more time, right? You're going to have to put them in there. You're going to have to get your client to re-sign the contract. And what can happen during that period of time?
Another offer.
Another offer.
Another offer comes in better than yours. So I'm going to get to that in a second again, but the beer, that is awesome. Awesome answer. Exclusion and inclusion.
Sorry.
You can take that, a beer. We'll wait.
Okay. Sorry.
Really kidding. There have been some funny things on TV, some funny TV commercials about Zoom calls, right? All right. I am wearing pants, if anybody's wondering.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm wearing shorts. Okay. All right, we're getting there. We're getting to what do we offer for this property, but there's more. Well, wait, there's more. What other data or information do we need to gather? I'm just going to say some things. How about days on market, right? Wouldn't you say days on market is an important number to know as your seller, a buyer, considers an offer? But be careful, all right? How many of you seasoned agents have gone to make an offer on a home that's been on the market for 90 days, and you send your offer in, and you get an email back from the listing agent, oh, we received 3 offers today on this property.
Oh,
Brian, you nodding your
yes.
head?
You said, oh, yeah, right.
It happens. It happens. Like something gets dropped into the air, or maybe there's an interest rate drop, or something happens in the neighborhood, and all of a sudden, there's one property that's been kind of limping along, boom. There are multiple offers after 90 days on the market. It happens. So not very often, not often, but it has happened to me. So be careful. Days on market, should indicate some things to you, but be careful with it. Somebody alluded, Osneda made a comment, no, somebody said, or Jenna said, go back a year. You want to see what kind of market you're in. Are we in a market that favors the buyers, or are we in a market that favors the sellers? Because that is going to be part of the input. We're basically making a stew here, and out of the stew is going to come a meal, and that meal is the offer that we're going to make. And part of that stew is what kind of market are we in? It might not have a big bearing on our offer, but it's important to know if this neighborhood, I've got one neighborhood, I got a house listed in it, and one home has gone under contract since February 1st. And I hate to say it, but if a buyer was looking to buy my listing right now, they could look at that and see, man, every home in here has been on the market since February 1st, and not a single home has gone under contract since February 1st in this neighborhood. Wouldn't that be, they feel a little bit like they have some leverage in the negotiation. What kind of market are we in, and what kind of market is this particular neighborhood in? Okay, let's get back to Osneda's comment about the CMA showing us that maybe this price is really up there, really high, but our client loves the home. Well, now what do we have to be a little bit concerned about on behalf of our client and talk them through? Let's say they made they had to have this house. The house is listed higher than the comps look like it would be, but they say, forget it, we have to have it, and let's go in and you get into a contract up here. What is going to be a concern down the road?
Might be an
Appraisal.
Appraisal.
Higher.
Appraisal, right. So this is where we become the top 5% of all realtors in the state of Texas. And that is in setting expectations. What makes us a good realtor is not understanding how we navigate the waters. It's understanding that we have to tell our clients what's ahead in the river. Okay, if we're just navigating the waters and taking our buyers and sellers down the stream, and then all of a sudden we hit rapids, wouldn't it be better if we told them, you know, 2 miles ago, oh, by the way, there's going to be some rapids up here, maybe. Sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're not. But wouldn't we look more professional, more competent if we had set the expectations for our clients about what could be ahead? Everybody say yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and that's gonna be the difference between a Keller Williams agent and everybody. No, that's right. This is going on YouTube, and okay, I take that back. Any Remax agent that might be watching, but this is going to be the difference between a highly professional agent and someone who's just trying to check the boxes and get to that commission. We have to give and set expectations with our clients. So, you know, Mrs. Buyer, I know you love this house, and we're gonna go for it. We're gonna offer close to the list price, even though it seems high. It's happened before. People have done that before. I know this is the house you want because your mother lives on the next block and you want to be close to her, and this is it right now. But here's what's going to happen. Down the road, this home might not appraise. And at that moment, you're going to have written a check for earnest money. You're going to have paid an option fee to the seller. You're going to have paid for inspections. You may have even purchased a survey by that time. Now, we can probably get your earnest money back if the house doesn't appraise and you have to walk away from that. But here's what you need to realize. If the seller doesn't come down in their price, you're either going to have to bring more money to the table and feel okay about buying it at a higher price than it appraised at, or we're going to terminate, and yes, you'll probably get your earnest money back, but you're going to be out the other money, the option fee, the inspection, maybe the survey fee, and the appraisal fee, by the way, that you paid for. And now you're back to square one. So are you willing to roll the dice and take that chance? I'm just saying it could happen. It could happen where the appraisal comes in short. Any comments about that?
Hey, Chris. I've actually called the listing agent when I've seen a listing that was the deal didn't go through, and I asked them why. What happened? Was it a was it a financing issue? Was it a inspection issue? What happened?
Let's back that up. If you guys made a list of questions to ask an agent, Jenna, that is awesome. If the home was under contract before, what happened? What happened to that last deal? You have an inspection report from the last deal. Did you want to add anything to that, Jenna?
I have a question.
No, that was just on when we were going over this list of, like, when you call a listing agent, what do you ask them? And so I was just saying that was something I've done in the past.
Yeah, great.
We do an appraisal as buyers, and if the listing agent asks for how much did the appraisal come in for, we passed appraisal, it appraised. Do you tell the listing agent or you don't?
Well, it's confidential. I'll tell them if the buyer gives me permission to.
What is the bad thing about saying how much it appraised for? Because the listing agent came to me, he's like, I just want to know how close I am was to the listing price.
No.
I've
Well,
never done that.
it's confidential. I mean, and you shouldn't do that unless your buyer says that.
My buyer will ask me, what is the problem if I say? And I have no idea. I've never been asked that question before.
I don't have a quick, snappy answer for that.
Okay.
Brian might. Brian Varvel, you need to unmute yourself and jump in this conversation.
I'm sorry, I missed that question because I stepped away for a sec.
Oh,
What was the question?
Yeah, why is the amount that a house appraises for confidential, and why would you not want to share that with the seller?
The only time it's ever come up for me, I just told them, well, you know, it's confidential to the buyer since they paid for it.
And a beer, you're talking about if it made value. Yeah, you already said.
Yeah, it made value and everything. And the listing agent was like, I would just like to know. And I've never had that asked before from a listing agent.
Yeah.
I just always, me as a listing agent, always ask, did we pass appraisal? Yes, thank you so much. I never asked for how much.
By the way,
Well, I mean,
that's a big moment in time. By the way, we literally put happy faces in the on our whiteboard if we ever get back to the office. So.
Okay, thank you.
ultimately, it's up to the buyer if he wants to disclose it since it's their product.
Got it.
All right, let's move on. So,
Just real
yep.
quick, to go back to that, because I just finished my appraiser's license renewal. And on that, it's actually, even though the buyer has paid for it to get done, it is property of the lender. And so unless it is, the information is released by the actual client, they won't release that information. The buyer will get a copy as an intended user, but again, it does go back to confidentiality. They cannot release that.
I like that answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
Thank you so
it's very
much.
I love
confusing.
that answer.
And
It's not
even-
the buyer.
Right, and as an appraiser, we can't even actually talk to the client. We have to go through an AMC
Right.
in order to get clarification of why the appraisal is being used for, even though we have to do all three uses, no matter what.
Thank you.
I
You're
love
very
that.
welcome.
You go by Jennifer or Jenny?
Either or,
Okay. Thank you, Jenny.
no problem.
Awesome. That's why I teach these classes, right? I learn something every time I teach a class. So the other thing is, find out as much as possible about the loan. Certainly the type of loan. You're going to need to know the nuts and bolts of the loan in order to write the offer. But going back to the appraisal deal, what is the relatively new form that we have in our arsenal as a buyer's agent to use if we do have a concern about the appraisal?
Termination based on appraisal.
Right. We call it the appraisal addendum. Well, what two types of loans do you not use that with?
Veteran loan?
Yeah, you don't use that addendum with FHA or VA loans. As a matter of fact, it says it right at the top of the addendum. Not for use with FHA or VA loans. Why? Because the third-party financing addendum already has a termination option for a buyer written into the third-party finance addendum for FHA and VA, not for conventional. And so that's when that document can be used in the situation I just said. If a buyer wants to be able to be assured that they can terminate if the appraisal falls short of whatever number, the sale price, or even a number underneath that addendum will give the buyer that unrestricted unilateral right to terminate with no questions asked. Okay, we're going to start talking about an offer price. So let's define an offer price. So last week, I gave you a definition for a list price, and it went something like this. A list price is that price that gets the most people through the front door, leaving as little money on the table as possible while addressing the goals and motivations of our seller client. And I said, when I said that definition last week, I said, now next week, we're going to have a definition for an offer price. For homework, if you'd like, see if you can come up with a definition. Did any anybody do that. If you didn't,
No,
it's
I'm
fine.
sorry.
But if you're like one of those high C people that right after the class was over, you sat down and you worked for an hour on it and you penned it out and you brought it to the class today, I didn't want to leave you in the lurch and not give you a chance to say it. No takers.
Help, Chris, we didn't do our homework.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. No takers. So again, 5 people looking at the same house, we're going to get 5 different offer prices. So here's my definition. Now, this is just my definition of an offer price. That price that will have the best chance of getting a desired response from the seller. Now notice I didn't say an acceptance from the seller. That price that will have the best chance of getting a desired response from the seller while addressing the buyer client's real estate goals and motivations. That price that will have the best chance of getting a desired response from the seller while addressing the buyer client's real estate goals. It's story time. It's story time. So I had clients who were friends of mine. Their daughter and my oldest son were actually classmates, kind of. They were both in junior high at the time, kind of, hung around in the same co-ed group, guys and girls just goofing around. And they decided they want to look at homes. And so we went and looked at this home. And it was priced pretty high. And we went in and they could not say enough bad things about the house. Oh my gosh, these are single pane windows. The home is facing south. We're going to bake in this house. Our energy bills are going to be through the roof. It's going to take a lot of money to remodel this kitchen. Not sure I want to be on the golf course. And then they said, okay, well, let's make a low offer. And so we made a low offer and it got what? Rejected, right. So they want to go back and take a second look at it. So we go back and look at it again. Same thing. Now they found more things wrong with it. I've never seen people make an offer on a house they hated more. But they said, okay, well, we'll come up $10,000. And so we go back with still a pretty low offer, but 10,000 better than the week before. Got the same response. No counter, nothing. So 2 weeks later, I remember it was the Sunday. I remember where I was sitting in my car. My wife and I were leaving small group at our church. We were leaving Karen, we were in a small group, right? And we're leaving small group and I'm in the car and I get a call from these buyers. Chris, we decided we want to go in full price. So I say, okay, so this is a Sunday. Remember Sunday? So I call the listing agent. Hey man, very well-known listing agent, Remax agent. We're coming in at full price. I'm going home to write the offer up. Oh, Chris. We had a reload buyer in this weekend and they had to make a decision this weekend. They fell in love with this house. They came in, they made a full price offer and it's gone. Now, what am I thinking now? I'm thinking that I'm going to call my clients and they're going to be fine. Why?
Because you probably already told them they shouldn't have put you should have been wiser about the first two offers.
Okay.
No,
Why else did I think they were going to be okay with not getting this house?
They hated the house.
They hated the
And all
house.
this other stuff they got to go do to it.
Right. Now they don't have to worry about how they're going to cool the house and how much it's going to cost and how much they're going to have to pay to remodel the house. That's what I thought. So I called them back. I said, hey guys, the house is gone. It got sold this weekend. And I was expecting them to say, okay, well, let's go look for another. Well, it turns out the wife cried for a week. The daughter had already placed all her furniture in her bedroom furniture in this one particular bedroom in the house. And I was afraid she was gonna, at lunchtime in school, rake my son over the coals saying, your dad just ruined our lives. The father, I guess, felt a little bit bad. He wasn't really, they were just devastated and upset. And the listing agent, I called the listing agent back. He said, because he and I were friends, and I said, man, are you sure, how solid does this deal look? My folks really love that house. And he said something to me that I never thought about. He said, well, did you ask them the question that I'm about to teach you right now? And the two ways of asking the question. So in the promo, Madeline said, the most important question to ask your buyer clients. And I hadn't asked the question. What was I doing that makes, Karen, Baptist ears, hold them close, that makes an ass out of you and me? What was I doing?
Assume.
Oh, thank you, Jenna, for unmuting yourself. Assume what, spell it, A-S-S, U-M-E. It makes an ass out of you and me, right? My track coach told me that when I told him that I assumed something in a track meet that lost our team, the high school track meet. So I'll never forget Mr. Edgerton telling me that. So I assumed that they could take the house or leave it. Here's the question. On a scale from 1 to 10, and I never not ask this question to my buyers anymore, ever. I always ask this question. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being this is your house and no one else's. 10 being this is your house and no one else's. And 1 being you could care less if they took your offer and used it for puppy papers. Where are you? And I say to them, I say, I want a number, and I want, if it's a couple, I say, I want a number from both of you. And your numbers might be different. But I want a number from both of you. And this goes back to the 5 different people. Because if one person is a 2 and another person's a 4 and another person's a 6 and another person's an 8 and another person's a 12, 1 out of 10, aren't we having a different discussion at what will be starting our offer at?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is the way to ask the question to maybe a high D or a high C. Here's how you can ask it to a high I or a high S. If I was to call the listing agent right now and they told me exactly what happened to me that Sunday night, Chris, I'm sorry, the house is gone. Would you be?
I think it's her. She's coming over because I have the right contact.
Does somebody need to mute? Is that what you're trying to do, Karen?
She muted already.
Okay. All right. Other way to ask this question. This is good. That's why I didn't want anybody to miss it. The other way to ask this question is, if I was to call the listing agent right now and they told me the house was gone, would you be, okay, it's no problem. There are other houses out there and we'll just go find another house? Or Osnada or Hannah, do you want to finish it? They're gone. Or would there not be a bucket big enough for you to throw up into? Osnada, have you ever used that one?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, I've trained the people to use that.
More than once.
Are you in San Francisco?
No, I don't know how to take that thing out of the background.
Move your head. I want to see it.
Oh.
Yeah, the Golden Gate. Okay. So now, why am I spending so much time on this? Because if you don't ask that question, you're going to assume things about your buyer's motivation. And you're going to make a misstep like I did with this really wonderful family. Now, the good news is happy ending. They got over it, right? They got over it. They lived another day, and then they actually bought a house that they loved even more. This time I asked them the question. But I have to give Gary Jones with RE/MAX the credit for that. Karen, remember Gary Jones?
I do.
Yep, he's the one. He was a listing agent. He said, "Well, Chris, you got to ask him this question." And it was a good training moment there. So, but don't just take their answer. So they come back with a 7. Okay. Well, now dig deeper. Right? What do we learn in bold? Dig deeper. Go deeper for their motivation. Okay, so you're saying a 7. So that means to me that you pretty much have found the house that you've been looking for. And you'd like to make sure that you have the best shot at getting the house. You may not want to go full price. And you realize that if you don't go full price, there might be a slight chance, even though the house has been on the market 65 days and you're going to offer close to full price, there might be a chance that someone could come in and buy it out from under you. Always, if they're not a 10 and you're not going to offer full price, and every sentence like that, you're okay if someone comes in and buys it out from under you. Because really, that again is what makes us a good realtor. We're getting in this boat, and you're okay that there might be rapids up ahead. That's what you're okay with that. Yes, I'm okay with that. It's a little bit of a way for us to cover ourselves too, and make sure that we've had these critical conversations. If their answer is a 2, okay, so what are you thinking as an offer? And they come in at 90% of list price. And I say to them, okay, so just to be clear, you're trying to steal this house. Well, yes, Chris, I am. I'm trying to steal the house. You know, they're usually going to be kind of honest with me, right? So you want to dig deeper and really flesh out what their answer means, because now it's going to be time to start making and putting together an offer. Now, your offer is going to send a message to the seller. You will send a message. You'll send it over with a cover letter, a cover email, but all the things in your offer are going to, and I alluded to this earlier, are going to send a message about the buyer's intent with the offer. The message might be, my buyer has to have this house, and here is an offer that we believe your seller will accept. Or is your offer saying, look, you've been on the market a long time, you haven't gotten any offers, you haven't had any contracts, I've done a CMA, it looks like you're probably overpriced. My buyer is serious about buying the house, but we're making an offer that we believe is indicative of probably the market value of the home. By the way, that's a good cover letter when you send a lowball offer. So There are 4 different responses that you might get from the seller after you put together this offer. The first one is acceptance. Now let's camp out there for a little bit. If the seller wants to accept the offer, then you should have done everything in your power to make sure that the offer is what?
Complete.
What?
Complete. Oh,
Complete, signable, right? Signable. And actually, I don't think signable is an actual word. Every time I put that in a Word document, it like tells me it's not in the dictionary. But I like that word, Karen. It's another way for saying complete. Right, we want an offer that's signable. Every blank has something in it. Every box that needs to be checked is checked. Every document that needs to be part of that contract is there. If it's an in-house deal with another agent in our office, you need to have the what? Notice of intermediary, right? So if there's a document missing, I'm just using that as an example. So suppose you're doing this in-house deal and you send everything over to the other agent in our office, and they're like, this is great, Chris, all we need is a notice of intermediary. Well, now you have to go back, open up your computer to whatever document program you use, create the notice of intermediary, send it over to your buyer, get them to sign it, and get it to the listing agent. Well, what could happen in that period of time?
another offer.
Another offer could come in. So you want to send over, and this is really what's going to separate you also professionally from 95% of the other agents. I probably get literally 1 out of 20 offers sent to me that could be signed if my seller wanted to sign them.
Chris?
19 out of 20 have something missing, something wrong. Karen, do you want to add something?
I just want to say so many, we've got seasoned and newer agents on the call. So many of the newer agents that I help say, oh my goodness, this takes so long. And of course, I'm helping them fill out forms for the first time and stuff like that. So yes, it would take much longer then. But they have no idea. They think, oh, well, I'll just send the 1 to 4 and the third party financing. Isn't that all I need to give them for an offer? And it's hard to let them understand or make sure that they understand the importance of getting everything done then at the first offer, so that you show yourself wise and also show your buyers as being important too.
Also, what does a well-written, complete offer, all the T's crossed, all the I's dotted, communicate to the other agent on the other side who may not know you?
That you know what you're doing.
Exactly.
And you're going to represent your people well.
Love it. So you need to have a complete offer. Every T cross, every I dotted, every exclusion's excluded, every inclusion included, mud forms, seller's disclosure, on and on and on and on. Don't be a lazy agent. I love the little pop-up things that are coming up on, right. You can tell a lazy agent, right? You get this offer and it's like halfway filled in. I can't sign this offer. Okay. Second response that you might get might be a counter offer. Now, if you get a counter offer, what has the seller understood? Now, unmute yourself. Obviously, if the seller comes back accepting it, you've knocked it out of the park and you've done a great job. But if they come back with a counter offer, what does that say about how the seller has perceived the message you sent when you sent the offer over?
That they looked at every single item, and that's what they are objecting to. They're not objecting to it in entire. It's just those few things that they would like to renegotiate. So it means that they are accepting, they just want to reach common ground.
It means that they were happy with the offer, to a certain extent. they were pleased to receive it. If you get a counter offer, is that a pretty good indication that there's not any, now you can't assume this, but is it a pretty good indication that there's not another offer or like an imminent offer coming in?
Not always. Sometimes
Okay.
there is, and if my offer is almost close to what the seller wants, I'm the kind of a listing agent that if I'm having an offer coming in and I know there is another, but I see that my client, let's say I call the lender and the lender is strong and I would want to finalize a good deal that I feel it's safer for my seller. But if I have another one come in, then I'll pick up the phone and say, please, if you have the highest and best, give me. And I will say the same to the same. But I will try to work with a good agent that knows what they're doing and they're getting what my seller wants.
Okay. And I have certainly made a counter offer with the knowing that I might be getting another offer, but there's another response that a seller can give that I train my folks, and you know, when I teach contracts and negotiations, I make sure I go over this. There's another response that's similar to a counteroffer, but it leaves the door open to receive and entertain other offers. And it's really what I would recommend if you, as a listing agent, believe that there's other interest, and that's an invitation to submit a new offer. It's a rejection of offer, but invitation to submit new offer. It looks a lot like a counteroffer, but in a counteroffer, you're extending your hand and you're saying, my seller will sell the home to you, Mr. Buyer, if you make these changes to your offer. With an invitation to submit new offer, you're saying, my seller will look at your offer more favorably if you resubmit it with these changes. So at that point, the buyer's resubmitting the offer. So if another offer comes in, now you just have two offers coming in at the same time, and you don't have to untangle yourself from having made a counteroffer.
So you tell them resubmit, the invitation to resubmit with what you want to counter with, or you just invitation to resubmit and stop?
Let's be careful with the word. So I would not use the word counter there. The form that we have, which is titled Rejection of Offer, Invitation to Submit New Offer, has lines, and you fill in those lines with whatever you want to see changed. Right. It looks like a counteroffer, but right in the form itself, it says this is not a counteroffer.
Okay, cool.
The home remains on the market and the seller can entertain other offers. So I'm just going through the four different types of responses here. Now, the last option, there is a fifth option. Fred Wright used to always say to me, it's perfectly acceptable to totally ignore an offer. Now you have to present all offers, but there's nothing that says that you have to respond back to the buyer agent. Yes, you have to take the offer you received and present it to your seller, but you can ignore it for that point forward. You can just never get back. Now I don't agree with that, but Fred Wright used to make a big point that that's a perfectly acceptable response. But the fourth one, and remember my definition of an offer price, okay, that has the best chance of getting a desired response. Well, what's the one response that you don't want to get? No matter if you're a 1 or a 10 or anything, what don't you want to hear?
No.
Right. No,
Don't take
or
it.
hell no, or we reject your offer. Now, a rejection with an invitation to submit a new offer and some different terms,
Yeah.
that at least gives you, some guidance as to what the seller is looking for. But if you get no, too low, where does that leave your buyer? Now, this is what I've been trying to get to. Where does that leave your buyer?
with not a bunch of options. He can try, but now he's going to have to really do a whole lot better for that seller to even think about them.
Have you put your buyer, has your buyer put himself or herself in a strong negotiating position or a weak negotiating position?
Weak.
Can I see everybody's head nod up and down, right? And that's the danger of making an offer that's too low. Mr. Buyer, you want to offer 90%. Let me tell you what is very likely going to happen with that offer. You're going to get a no if it's a polite response, and worse if the person just doesn't want to be polite. Now, are you okay with that? Because what that's going to do is put you in a position where you are having to continue to now start raising your number up, 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 and up, and the seller is just going to sit back, and then when you stop raising your number, then the seller might talk back to you and give you a response. Do you want to put yourself in that situation? So this is the conversation to have with them. What do I offer for this property? What you want to do is avoid putting your client in a weak negotiating position. And this happened to me 2 weeks ago. I had a buyer that was looking at a home that was listed in the upper 700s. And it's been on the market a while. And he wanted to offer in the mid 600s. That's way below 90% of list price. So it's listed about, just 770-ish, and we offer 6 something. I loved the listing agent's response. Thank you, Chris. Very polite. Thank you, Chris. Seller counters at $1 million. Oh, I loved it. I laughed out loud, and I typed back 2 words. I said, got it. Now I went to my buyer, and they were expecting a rejection. They really were. I went to the buyer and I said, the seller rejected your offer without a counteroffer. I sugar-coated it a little bit, okay? But in so many words, the seller rejected your offer without a counteroffer, and they were okay. And I told them that. I said, you know what, you're probably going to get, that's all right. It's okay if we get a rejection. They have their price. They have the most that they want to offer for this particular home, and they just. Now, what if it comes back with a comment? Okay, and this is what Osneda was getting at before. Now, if your buyer's serious, and the offer is serious, it's well written, well repaired. And by the way, I didn't just throw that offer out there. I had my buyer sign every document. I sent it over. It was a complete offer. I was not expecting them to sign it or accept it, but it was a complete offer. Now, if they can, and this is what Osneda was getting at, if they come back and they say this offer is insulting to my to my seller, there's a couple of different responses that I have, and one, what I'm trying to convey to the listing agent is, look, my buyer's serious, okay? It might feel low, but it's really in the ballpark of being a reasonable offer. It's over 90%. And anytime I get an offer over 90%, I tell my sellers that we should keep the conversation going, because it's not where you start out, it's where you end up. And so really, you see I'm serious. I filled out all the paperwork. I had them sign everything. We're serious about buying the house. And I understand that your seller feels, insulted. Well, really, the first offer was made by your seller, Mr. Listing Agent. When you did the MLS, that's the first offer. And that's what I talked about last week. The first offer in a real estate transaction, if you're texting or doing email right now, this is important to listen to. The first offer in a real estate transaction is what the seller has listed the home for. They are offering to sell the home at this amount of money with these other things thrown in. They have a survey, they don't have a survey. That's the initial offer. And Mr. Listing Agent, what we're really doing is making a counter offer. Now, my buyer thought that your listing price was a little high, but he wasn't insulted by it. We decided to continue the conversation and submit an offer. So I would ask that you go back to your seller and please tell them that we're serious and we want to continue the conversation, and that, you know, he shouldn't be insulted by the person that made an offer after 140 days on the market, but all the people that haven't made an offer in the time that you've had the house on the market and you've had all these people walking for your own. So, you know, if they come back with a comment now, you know, we deserve my seller counters at 1 million. We deserve that. I mean, I'm just saying, I was expecting that. Actually, that was kind of nice to what I was expecting to hear. But, you know, we want to keep the conversation going. It's a start. But here's the deal. Okay, this is real important. Your offer should have a goal of having a response other than a rejection. It really should. If your person wants to buy the house, you should at least shoot for getting a response with some guidance, an invitation to submit a new offer, or a counter offer, or an acceptance. That should be your goal, is to have one of those 3 responses. And again, explain to your buyer that you want to keep your buyer in a strong negotiating position. Now, anybody have any comments before we go a little bit further here into the offer? Any personal stories, or, you know, I get tired of hearing myself talk.
I was going to say also the offers, like when you are working with a buyer on a house that doesn't have any offers or any contracts, but when you also going to submit, let's say perhaps a backup offer, you also have to teach your buyer, you know, again, from 1 to 10, you want to submit a backup offer because you really love this house. So now it's not so much about having an offer that will not insult the seller, but also have an offer that will win this house.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's talk really quickly, because I only have this conference room I'm in for another 15 minutes. Let's talk about the other items that are in an offer that make the sales price either higher or lower, because the number that goes in paragraph 3C of the contract, the sales price, is just one part of it. Now, there's other things that are negotiable. What are some of the other things that are negotiable that will change the outcome of what a seller will actually realize from the sale of the home?
Seller contribution for closing.
Okay, paragraph 12, right? So if you offer 300,000, but you have 5,000 in paragraph 12, the seller's going to pay 5,000 of the buyer's closing costs. 300 sales price, 5,000 in paragraph 12. What really is the amount you're offering? Do the math. 300,000.
295.
And you're getting 5,000 in closing costs. The offer to a seller is 295. Does everybody get that?
Yes.
That's really the real sale price. Now let's add to that. What if you ask the seller to pay for the extra title insurance at the top of page 2? That's going to chip into the sale price. What if you ask them to pay for a new survey? Or if the existing survey isn't acceptable, you ask the seller to pay for a new survey. That's making your sale price lower? What if you put some of the HOA, homeowners association addendum costs on the seller? That's chipping away at the 300,000. So there are other things you can put in an offer, and you move. These are negotiable costs that you move from the buyer's side of the ledger to the seller's side of the ledger. Now, when can you do that and maybe get away with it? Karen, are you muted?
If you pay over full price.
I understand the sign language, right? If you're up at full price, then you have a better chance of getting the seller to pay for some of those things. But what if you're offering, low, and then on top of that, you're asking for all these other things?
Not good.
That would be like adding what? Insult to
Injury.
right? And so that's just gonna further the chance of you getting a rejection. Now, I want to just caution you about money in paragraph 12. So paragraph 12, very common that a part of an offer is going to be include a contribution for the seller to pay for some of the buyer's closing costs, especially in FHA and VA loans. This is very, very common. Now, all that you should tell the buyer is, okay, listen, we're offering 300,000, and we're going to ask them, you want help with your closing costs, so we're going to ask them for $5,000 in closing costs. You need to realize that this is like a $295,000 offer to the seller, and you have to kind of educate your buyer to understand that that's really the number that they're asking for. But in addition to that, the other thing you have to be careful about is you have to talk to the lender. Make sure the amount that's in paragraph 12 is an amount that the lender is going to allow. That's the first question. Will you allow this amount in paragraph 12? Because lenders have a limit as to what the seller can pay for a buyer's closing costs. And the second question to ask the lender, and the lender is the best person to answer this question, do you think that there's going to be this amount of closing costs and prepaids? If you put $11,000 in paragraph 12, there's a very good chance that the buyer's not going to have $11,000 in closing costs and prepaids. And what happens if he doesn't or she doesn't? The seller gets to keep the change. Okay, so you have to make sure that whatever number is going in there makes sense. And that's the pitfall of putting money in paragraph 12. Okay, so what we have is a big package. Again, we're putting together a stew, and now comes a meal, and that gets presented to the seller, and the seller is going to look at everything, not just the sale price. But let's talk about some special situations where you want to be careful about a sale price. Let's say you have a home listed at $320, and your buyer on a scale of 1 to 10 says an 8. They really wouldn't want to buy. They really want to buy the house. Or let's say it's listed at $315. But they don't want to pay full price. They feel like they can negotiate for a good price. And they're thinking in their minds they would like to end up at maybe 309 and 310. So they do conventional wisdom, and they say, well, if we start at 298, then we can meet in the middle at 310. Am I making sense? Okay, well, what is the psychological problem with crossing down below that 300 and sending to the seller an offer with a 2 in front of it? Is there, there is emotion involved in buying a home. And if the buyer was really shooting as a goal to get to the 310 or 311 point, I would say that you might have a better chance of getting there if you submitted an offer with a 3 in front of it than with a 2 in front of it. I'm just throwing that out there from 20 years of experience, that's been my case as a listing agent, you know, if I'm going to present an offer in that scenario to my own seller as 298 instead of 302, often there's going to be a different reaction to how badly this seller is going to want to work with this buyer. You know, just you got to think about little things like that. Okay, let's wrap up with multiple offer situations. Because a multiple offer situation is a place where you're really going to change your whole mindset about what your offer price is going to be. First of all, I would say if a seller tells you that they have multiple offers, believe them. If a listing agent tells you that, you know, I don't doubt what a listing agent tells me unless I have a good reason to, and I usually don't. And so I feel like I'm doing my buyer a disservice if I say, well, he says he has multiple offers. I don't know. It might not be true. I don't feel like that's going to help my seller get the house. So besides making a very strong cash offer or very strong sale price offer, house is listed, let's say at 320. Besides offering 320, what are some other things in the offer that you can do to separate, everybody unmute themselves, to win the multiple offer game?
Make the closing date shorter.
Good. You asked the list. Perfect. Who is that?
It was Monica Owens.
Oh, she was the one that had all the great answers last week. Yeah, that's why you asked the listing agent, right? Back at the beginning of class, what questions do you ask the listing agent? What's your ideal closing date, right? Now you have it. So you can pinpoint it and put that ideal closing date in the contract. Awesome, Monica. What else?
A shorter option period.
A shorter option period, that sometimes works against, but it does, no, that's a good answer, Jenna.
Oh, it's okay if you don't think it's good.
No, that does make your offer stronger and it does look attractive. But what in that paragraph 23, would really make a difference? Maybe keeping it at 10 days, but what else can you change in the paragraph?
Well, you could increase the amount of the option fee.
Exactly.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yep, that's exactly
Okay.
what I'm talking about. Yeah, you can make that number higher than normal. Now, in most cases, you're going to get that money back at the closing table, but a higher option money shows a deeper commitment to the transaction. It sends a message. Remember, I said every offer sends a message. Well, if you put $700 in as the option period, that sends a message. This buyer is serious, Mr. Seller, about buying your house. But what can you also do in paragraph 23 to really make it extra attractive?
Are you referring to the earnest money?
I'm talking about paragraph 23, the option paragraph.
Oh, whether or not it's refunded or credited back.
Exactly. Those two little boxes at the end of the paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
This option fee will be credited back to the buyer at closing or will not be credited back to the buyer at closing. So, and I teach this when I teach the contracts class about the power of using that. And that is, if you go in with the higher option money, let's say $600 or $700, but then you check the box, you don't have to give this back to the buyer at closing. Then in effect, what you've done is you've taken your $300,000 offer and you've made it a $300,700 offer. You've increased it by $700 and the seller is getting that $700 up front.
Right now.
So let me repeat that. So another way to add to the sales price is to make the option fee non-refundable at closing, which means the seller gets that check, they put it in the bank, they could go take a trip to Destin, Florida, you know, and that's their money to keep just for accepting your offer. So that's a strategy. Of course, you might have to go above list price sometimes. you might offer a lease back. That's another reason to ask, would a lease back be of interest to your seller? If they say yes, then you make the offer and you could give them a free lease back for a week. And that's pretty attractive. So there's a lot of different ways to separate your offer. You could pay title insurance, which is normally a seller's cost. You could say no home warranties. Seller doesn't have to pay for a home warranty. If you really want to take a little bit of a gamble, I don't necessarily recommend this, but let's say you suspect that some of the other offers are cash, you could go to the third-party finance addendum and make the transaction not contingent on buyer approval. There is a box there that you can check that says this contract is not contingent on buyer approval. Only do that if you're like 150% sure that your buyer is not going to have any problem qualifying for the loan. Okay.
So
I have
a question.
I have 1 minute because I reserved the conference room till 2:30 and almost 2:30. Yeah, go ahead.
So what if you run the comps? You know what the house you should price it for, because I'm facing this and it's driving me crazy now. I know what the house should be priced on. I know we're facing a multiple offer. I go and sometimes I increase more and yet I lose it. I keep losing it and it's driving me nuts. And I'm putting a very good offer and it's just, and the comps even are making sense for the price even if I'm asking above, and yet I lose.
Okay, I would go back up. I would go back up to the river and say, listen, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, there's probably going to be multiple offers on this transaction. And if there's 5 offers on this transaction, you have, in all other things being equal, you have a 20% chance of getting this house. And there are certain things that are completely out of my control. Do you want to move forward and go for it? If you've had that conversation with them and they don't get the house,
after trial number 10, they're getting tired. And I give the conversation, but it's ridiculous in this price range. It's like outrageous out there. I was like, oh my God. I'm reaching out to terminate and it expired now.
Yeah, Monica Owen just made a comment, you know, try to get some intel from the listing agent as to what the other offers are. Now, I usually tell when people ask me that as a listing agent, I usually say it's against the code of ethics for me to tell you what, you know, other offers are, but some agents might. I am so sorry I have to cut this off because I am the guest of Keller Williams Emerald Coast, and they have been really gracious to let me take this conference room for an hour and a half. And feel free to reach out to me with any questions you have, but I hope this was helpful. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you for doing this, Chris, out of your vacation. We appreciate it.
That's all right. Needed to get off the beach. You could tell I'm like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. What wisdom.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.